This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Kenyan relatives receive remains of victims of Ethiopian Airlines crash after DNA testing is completed. Supporters of Tunisia's Saied celebrate after preliminary results give him victory in the presidential runoff. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson urges members of Parliament to get Brexit done as Queen Elizabeth II reopens a Parliament. This is CGTN. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. The details of those stories in just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Troubled South African Airways in talks with private investors for a possible takeover. And the WTO allows the US to impose new tariffs on imports worth $7.5 billion from the European Union. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin in Ethiopia. The remains of the Kenyans who died in the Ethiopian Airlines plane crash on the 10th of March in Ethiopia have arrived in Kenya. An Ethiopian Airlines flight carrying the remains and the relatives of the victims left Addis Ababa Monday morning. Relatives went to Ethiopia's capital to collect the remains of their loved ones over the weekend after DNA testing identified them positively. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi now reports from Addis Ababa.
32 relatives of the Kenyan flight crash victims were on board the Ethiopian Airlines plane, which had a total of 157 passengers. The Kenyan embassy in Ethiopia says about 30 remains of the deceased Kenyans have been given to relatives. Ethiopian Airlines brought up to 2 relatives of each victim to Addis Ababa over the weekend to allow them to view the remains. 2 of the families decided to do cremation and took ashes home with them. The rest had the remains put in coffins. The Kenya embassy in Ethiopia oversaw the whole process until Monday morning when the families flew back home. The International Criminal Police Organization Interpol announced in September that it had positively identified all the 149 passengers and 8 crew members who died in the crash. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Celebrations have begun in Tunisia after exit polls showed that independent candidate Kais Saied has won the presidential runoff with over 70% of the votes. His rival media mogul Nabil Karoui is second with 23.11%, although no official results have been published. His supporters have been taking to the streets to celebrate his win. The independent candidate has also addressed them, vowing unity. Official results are due on Monday.
Tens of thousands of Tunisians took to the streets in the capital city Tunis and across the country to celebrate the victory. Kais Saied pledged to uphold the rule of law and its application to all citizens, including himself. The 61-year-old retired law professor shed light on urgent challenges facing the country. In addition, he noted that relations at home will be based on trust and responsibility.
The law applies to everyone. My role is to enforce it. Tunisia has reached a new stage in its history on the path of democracy, requiring to meet many social and economic challenges. The will of the people equals the level of decision. The state remains standing with its legislation and its international commitments.
Meanwhile, vote counting is underway. The election authority has mobilized thousands of agents to guarantee a transparent operation.
Vote counting is taking place in a smooth manner under the control of dozens of independent observers. We expect the results in each circumscription to be available in the next few hours.
Analysts argue that the 2 candidates in the presidential runoff and their electors must now turn the page and focus on rebuilding a strong state with a stable economy.
The integrity of the elections is an important achievement. There is no loser in the elections. The 2 candidates and all Tunisians have won. Political stability is the first condition for improving the economic situation, which is a national priority.
The presidential runoff election candidate Nabil Qarwi said he will wait for the Independent High Authority for the Elections, ISI, to announce the official results to take the right positions after consulting with the party's base and its political bureau. The new president campaigned without funding or backing from a structured political party. Exit polls show that 90% of Tunisian youths aged 18 to 25 and 86% of university professors and students voted for Kais Saied in the second presidential election since the 2011 popular uprising. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, Adnan is joining us now on the line from Tunis. He's standing by for us. Adnan, the final results were expected this evening. What's the latest on that? What do we know at this point?
The final results were expected at 17 GMT, but we are still waiting for the beginning of the press conference. It's clear from the election authorities members that Kais Saied has won with over 70%. What's new for the moment is that Nabil Qarwi lost the election, but he congratulated Kais Saied and he said that he will work with him within the constitution and within the official state organization to facilitate his role in the next 5 years. Nabil Qarwi said as a candidate, but also as a leader of the party Qalb Tunis, which won the second place in the parliamentary elections, work with Kais Saied, and he will help him and facilitate anything he will need in the next few years. Kais Saied, the winner of the presidential runoff election, pledged to uphold the rule of law and its application to all. He said the law applies to one. My role is to enforce it. Tunisia has reached a new stage in its history on the path of democracy, requiring to meet social and economic challenges. Pointed out, Kais Saied also promised, like Nabil Qarwi, to work with all political parties. He said that first week in office, he will invite all ruling and opposition parties to the negotiating table to set the priorities and also to work together in order to improve the economic, the social, and especially the security situation. Kais Saied will have to appoint two ministers, the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in consultation with the Prime Minister and the Parliament. The Parliament, which has not yet decided about the composition of the new government. We will certainly have another ruling party with other parties. We do not know yet if Nabil Qarwi will accept to work with another and to enter the government with another Islamic movement. Kais Saied also said that the state remains standing with its legislation and its international commitments. So Tunisia will respect all its international commitments in North Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in the world in general, with its international partners. People are still celebrating the victory. It's worth mentioning that over 3 million people voted for Kais Saied. It's more than the double of the number of people who voted for the 217 MPs. Observers here say that Kais Saied has more legitimacy than Parliament itself, although the Tunisian constitution stipulates that the Parliament rules rules and appoints the Prime Minister, and the President has less powers than the Prime Minister. But this new President will certainly have less powers than the Prime Minister and the Parliament, but he has more legitimacy, as over 3 million people voted for him, especially young people. It's worth mentioning that over 90% of young people voted for Kais Saied are aged 18 to 25, and over 90% of university professors, students, lawyers, judges, and independents have also voted for Kais Saied, who is described as the anti-establishment candidate and also as the candidate who will face or fight corruption from his first week in office. And he promised that he will realize some of his objectives in the first weeks in office, Saied has also vowed to give power to the people through what he described as regional councils. He said that the challenge of decentralization, economic, social, and political decentralization is the main challenge. So he will start with administrative decentralization from the first 100 days in office.
Right. And Adnan, you've mentioned two things there. 70% of the vote for Kais Saied, that is quite an overwhelming support from the people of Tunisia. And 90% of those who voted for Kais Saied are young people. So what is the expectation here from the young people by voting overwhelmingly for Kais Saied?
Young people have boycotted the first round of the presidential election. And they have also boycotted the first round and the second round. They also boycotted the legislative elections. They say that they are disillusioned. They are fed up of empty promises by political parties. Young people did not vote in the first round of the presidential election and in the legislative elections because they no longer trust the people in power, both the ruling and the opposition parties. It was a reaction against the established system in Tunisia. So they have high expectations, mainly expectations about employment. The unemployment rate has reached 15.3% 8 years after the 2011, 15.3% 8 years after the 2011 popular uprising. So they are waiting for jobs, for more job opportunities, and also for projects and development, not in the capital city, Tunis, and in the big cities like Sfax and Sousse, but the cities, the inner regions from where the popular uprising in 2011. They believe that Kais Saied, although he does not have direct power, direct control of the Ministry of the Economy or Employment, but he will be responsible through proposals, through projects he will present to Parliament for creating jobs and mainly creating a climate, a positive climate that will provide give reasons to foreign investors to come to Tunisia, to invest in Tunisia. This is what he said yesterday when he addressed the masses. He said that Tunisia will respect its priorities and will create a very favorable climate for foreign investors and for local investors in order to boost the economy. Young people have voted for a retired university professor who does not have a political backing, who does not have a structured political party, who spent less than $300 on his campaign, a retired man who taught thousands of Tunisia's best lawyers and judges. They voted for someone who will fight corruption because young people say that corruption is one of the main reasons behind unemployment and behind the low growth rate in this country.
Adnan Chauchi following the Tunisian elections for us, where he says the independent candidate Kais Saied has won the presidential runoff with over 70% of the vote and is poised to be Tunisia's incoming president. Now, meanwhile, Mozambicans are set to go to the polls in a few hours. The Southern African nation is still recovering from cyclones Kenneth and Idai that hit its coastal towns in March. The recovery efforts, together with the recent peace deal signed between the government and opposition party Renamo, are some of the issues that will define the outcome of the polls. Here's Laura Walubengo with more on that.
The two cyclones, Idai and Kenneth, landed in Mozambican coastal towns in short successions, leaving deaths, destruction and displacements in their wake. The South African nation is still recovering. But the signing of a peace deal between the government and opposition Renamo party in August was hailed as an historic moment. For Renamo, it was a moment that allowed it to present itself as a party focused on peace, as opposed to the violent campaigns that were associated with the former rebel movement. The party has its supporters.
I know that Renamo is a party that has come to serve the people, that wants what's good for the people. The party that stands for the end of corruption, good schools, improvement of education and provision of employment for young people who are currently helpless.
On its part, the ruling Frelimo party has never lost an election. The party also has a clean legacy of having leaders that never cling to power. Its fight for independence from Portugal makes it enjoy a solid support.
Frelimo is my father and my mother. It took me out of the slavery of the settler.
But away from the peace and effects of the cyclones, previous governance issues continue haunting the ruling party. The country is currently burdened by a $2 billion debt that was inherited from the previous government for projects that were never undertaken.
When Renamo wins these elections, it will firstly ensure that our people are well governed. For example, it will ensure that tax money from mineral resources, gas in particular, is used for the development of the Mozambican people and our country. Renamo's governance will never allow the Mozambican state, the Mozambican people, to pay back hidden debts, because these debts are owned, so it has to be up to the owners to pay.
Apart from that, the emergence of extremist groups in Cabo Delgado province is a worrying trend not just for Mozambique, but also the entire southern African region. Cabo Delgado is a province rich in liquid natural gas resources. Recently, President Filipe Nyusi signed a gas exploration contract with the French multilateral oil and gas company, Total, worth $25 billion. But violence has delayed the signing of yet another bigger contract with American ExxonMobil company. There have also been violent attacks by a group calling itself Renamo Military Junta, especially in the Rift Valley regions of Mozambique near the Gorongosa National Park. The group broke away from the Renamo party and has since declared a peace agreement signed between the government and opposition Renamo party as null and void. But President Nyusi says his party is the only one that can deliver what it promises based on its track record.
Our program is first and foremost based on trust, a trust that is based on the progressive steps that the country has made in the midst of so many difficulties experienced in the last 5 years.
As the Mozambicans go to the polls to decide their next leaders, the outcome will clearly ride on the past and present events. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Queen Elizabeth II has been delivering her opening speech to mark the start of a new session of Parliament. The first topic the Queen covered, and the one at the forefront of British politics, was Brexit. CGTN's Nawid Jabakil brings us more from London.
The streets were on lockdown, ready for the pomp and pageantry. Arriving in a horse-drawn carriage, the Queen sat on her throne for the 65th time to outline the government's policy plans for the year ahead.
My government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation.
The Queen's speech is a ceremonial event that's steeped in tradition, but the mood here is anything but normal. With the issue of Brexit hanging over British politics like a dark cloud, many opposition lawmakers have called this a political stunt. Without a majority in Parliament, the Prime Minister could see his Queen's speech voted down in the coming days, something that hasn't happened since 1924. The biggest issue that Boris Johnson faces here is that almost everything in Westminster at the moment is dominated by Brexit. His team are scrambling to get a last-minute deal with the European Union this week. But for many lawmakers here, the issue of Britain's departure has to be resolved before any ordinary business can go ahead. With a strong focus on law and order, opponents have accused the Prime Minister of using the speech to win support ahead of a general election that seems increasingly inevitable. Some are also worried about the Queen, whose role is largely symbolic, being dragged into politics.
Holding a Queen's speech before he's trying to call an election is a cynical stunt. He's using the Queen to deliver a pre-election party political broadcast for the Conservative Party. And it wasn't long ago that Johnson was pretending not to want an election. Now he's pretending that it's Labour doesn't want one.
The speech from the Leader of the Opposition was in the finest tradition of the tergiversating Leader of the Opposition. First he was opposed to no deal, now he seems to be opposed to any deal. First he was in favour of delivering Brexit, now he wants a second referendum. First he wanted an election, actually he wanted an election for quite a long time. Now he'd much rather not. He resembles a Janus, a push-me-pull-you facing both directions at once and yet unable to decide for either. His policy on cake is neither having it nor eating it.
Over the coming days, politicians will comb through the policies in the Queen's speech and then vote on whether to pass it. Ordinarily, they do, but these aren't ordinary times. And with one eye firmly on events in Brussels, political certainty here in Westminster is in very short supply. Nawiji Barkil, CGTN, London.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the programme. 3 years since a deadly truck bomb in Mogadishu, how has Somalia's security changed? And South African police plead with communities to help them save women from violence.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture. To discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Peace talks for Sudan's rival groups have begun in Juba. The talks bring together all Sudanese armed groups opposed to the government in Khartoum and representatives from the Regional Intergovernmental Authority for Development. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyed.
IGAD heads of state and government are in South Sudan's capital, Juba. They are meeting to push forward a peace process for Khartoum. Ending multiple conflicts in Sudan is a key condition for the country's removal from the United States list of sponsors of terrorists.
No one side to any political conflict can win through the barrel of a gun, but more successfully through political dialogue, negotiation, and compromises.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir initiated the Sudanese peace talks in July this year. They aim to bring all Sudanese armed opposition groups to the negotiating table with their government after the ousting of former President Omar al-Bashir.
It is my hope that our convening will pave the way for an agreement to emerge between the transitional government and the other parties to the talks.
The civil war in Sudan's Blue Nile and Darfur regions is a key topic as the country attempts to move towards democracy.
We have come to the talks with a firm and a strong will and determination to achieve a new Sudan of freedom, justice, and equality.
Some opposition groups say they are yet to agree on who should mediate between the powers to end the war.
First of all, we need peace in the Sudan. So we need to make sure that we reach an agreement. Then we can achieve a democratic rule in the country.
Is also disagreement on where the talks should be held, with some opposition groups opposed to Juba being the venue of the negotiations. Sudan's transitional government says peacemaking with rebels is one of its main priorities. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
On to Somalia now, and it's 3 years since a deadly truck bomb killed hundreds of civilians in Mogadishu. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo reports now on lessons learned and samples public opinion on the anniversary of the deadly massacre.
Somalia's Prime Minister Hassan Ali Khaire has laid the foundation stone for the construction of a national blood bank. Once completed, this will be the country's first blood bank in 3 decades. The country is marking 2 years since a deadly truck bomb killed more than 500 innocent civilians at this junction, the busiest in the capital, Mogadishu. Following the attack, lack of a functioning blood reserve came to light after several victims succumbed due to lack of blood and immediate medical assistance.
This national blood bank will cater to the needs of everyone in the country. We are marking 2 years since the deadly massacre along Zobe intersection. The idea was part of suggestions created by young volunteers who provided support to victims of the deadliest attack in Somalia.
2 years on, Al-Shabaab hasn't claimed responsibility for that attack, the deadliest in Somalia's modern-day history. A monument to honor the victims has since been erected at the scene of the blast. This monument behind me is a constant reminder of the hundreds of lives lost 2 years ago in one of the world's deadliest terrorist attacks. 2 years on, Al-Shabaab continues to remain a regional threat and has since been ranked as Africa's deadliest terrorist organization. On the streets of the capital, opinion remains divided. Many say security has improved with a reduction in the number of deadly blasts along key roads. Others say nothing much has changed.
Security responsibility lies with us all, not just security agencies. We have seen a reduction in the number of terrorist attacks in Mogadishu, but more must be done to end insecurity.
Nothing much has changed since 14th October 2017. Attacks keep happening in the city. It's time security heads and the country's leadership come up with measures to address insecurity.
Security agencies have set up concrete blasts and barricades in most government institutions to reduce the impact of deadly bombings. Al-Shabaab has since managed to breach security perimeters and launched attacks targeting Parliament, airport, the UN and African Union bases, as well as the heavily guarded presidential palace. Somali forces are gradually taking over security responsibilities from African Union troops. Securing Mogadishu will, however, remain a daunting task for state security agencies. However, the government insists that an end to decades-long arms embargo will help it take the fight to the militants' doorstep and avoid a repeat of such deadly bombings. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The South African Police Service is tackling gender-based violence through its Men for Change structure. It hosted an awareness campaign in Pretoria on Monday in response to the spike in violence against women, children and other vulnerable groups. CGTN's Jolisa Njamela has more.
This awareness campaign is led by South Africa's Men in Blue. It seeks to raise awareness on the scourge of violence with a view of mobilizing society to play an active role in assisting the work of the police in detecting, preventing and fighting gender-based violence within communities. Top police management want to ensure that the issue of violence against women and children is prioritized and kept in the spotlight. They visited some police stations to assess how victims of gender-based violence are being treated by frontline officers.
The police remain the key frontline services for victims and survivors, but those survivors and victims are often traumatized all over again when they report their cases to the police.
As a result, many of them refrain from reporting.
Police station must be sanctuary, must be place of safety. As they are victimized, they go to police stations. Don't repeat their victimization. Don't ask them silly questions.
This mobilization drive comes in the wake of multiple murders of women in South Africa in the past few months. The police minister told hundreds of South African police members to take seriously the adage that says charity begins at home.
We must make a serious commitment that we shall forever respect our mothers, respect our sisters, respect our wives, respect our girlfriends. So it will be easy for all of us to go beyond those people, but we need to start there. Women are human beings. Rights are the same. There are no less rights of women and bigger rights of men. It's one orientation maybe that we'll have to work on, to say boys will be boys. Boys and girls are all human and they must be treated as such. To make sure that women are protected and they have a right with their bodies, they have a right to dress as they want. Ours is to protect them.
The drive is supported by some taxi organizations.
I want to caution that all the authorities, the facts, and everyone who is doing the gender-based violence know that the taxi people are here. Tell you what, we are not going to stop.
The police ministry will from now on deploy more police officers over weekends as part of the new campaign. Weekends are said to be the times when most crimes occur. Unison Jamila for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Troubled South African Airways in talks with private investors for a possible takeover. And the WTO allows the U.S. to impose new tariffs on imports worth $7.5 billion from the European Union.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's national carrier, South African Airways, is in talks with a number of potential investors. This is according to the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa. He announced that the embattled state-owned airline is open to private sector participation after over-dependence on state bailouts. A cash injection of $372 million had been approved for the 2019 and 2020 financial year, but the cash-strapped airline still needs more money. Well, SAA is amongst the state-owned enterprises that are heavily indebted to the economy, that of course is already under pressure from slow growth and high unemployment. Meanwhile, Qatar Airways is reportedly seeking to buy a stake in Rwanda's national carrier, Rwanda Air. The deal is expected to shake up the continent's aviation industry. If confirmed, the acquisition will enable Qatar Airways to solidify its presence in Africa, given its current woes with its Gulf neighbors. Now, Qatar Airways was banned from flying over neighboring Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain since mid-2017. This was a result of a dispute between it and the Gulf states. They, of course, were key markets for the airline, and so buying a stake in Rwanda Air will support its expansion into Africa as an alternative market. And the United States has received a green light to impose tariffs on European imports worth about $7.5 billion in retaliation for illegal EU subsidies to airplane maker Airbus. Now, this follows a ruling by the World Trade Organization on a 15-year-long legal battle. The WTO formally cleared the US to take countermeasures against the EU and the Airbus producing countries, which of course are Britain, France, Germany and Spain. Previously, a WTO arbitrator awarded a record right to retaliate over those illegal subsidies this month. The US says it will impose 10% tariffs on Airbus planes and 25% import tax on other agricultural and industrial items on October 18th.
Ambassador Shea spoke, yeah, that's right. He said that they prefer a negotiated outcome, but nevertheless they were going ahead in line with what was authorized by the arbitrator. And then the European Union spoke, not the ambassador, I believe. I don't know. That was Paolo Gargani. Okay. Expressing concerns about some of the arbitrator's findings. Canada intervened as well.
There's a third party.
There's a third party. And that was that.
And moving on now, the Nigeria Labour Congress, or the NLC, has called for a nationwide strike. This, of course, is after the unions differed with the Nigeria Governors Forum over specific salary adjustments being sought by workers on the new national minimum wage. Well, the NLC is demanding for a 29% salary increase for junior officers and a 24% adjustments for senior officers. The federal government, however, had presented a proposal of 11% and 6.5% salary increases accordingly. Now, following the collapse of the first phase of negotiations, the federal government negotiating team and the Joint National Public Service Negotiating Council will meet again on a Tuesday. And to Egypt now, the country's Financial Regulatory Authority has approved the reduction of stock trading fees in an effort to boost investment and competitiveness with other regional markets. However, the final approval is still pending the authorization of the cabinet. Notably, the trading service fees, clearing and settlement fees, as well as stock market commissions, will also be decreased. Now, transaction fees charged on bonds listed on the stock exchange will be reduced to half following that adjustment. Egypt's government plans to sell those shares in 23 state-owned firms as part of its plan to raise about $4.93 billion US. Various global markets, including Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange, have reduced commissions in a push for an increase in trade volumes. Well, on the international stage, Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to visit Saudi Arabia with a meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the agenda. The two leaders are expected to discuss security, trade and bilateral cooperation. Meanwhile, Putin says that Russia could play a positive role in easing tensions in the Gulf following a spate of attacks in the region. Now, tensions in the region are high following attacks on oil installations in Saudi Arabia and the seizure of tankers in the Gulf. In addition, Russia is ready to participate in an investigation into those attacks. Russia plans to work with the kingdom and other partners to eliminate any attempts to destabilize the oil market. The Russian president also says that Moscow could play a positive role in attempts to ease tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Let's take a listen.
If someone thinks such acts, seizing tankers and attacking oil infrastructure, will in any way affect Russia's cooperation with our Arab friends, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, or in any way destroy OPEC Plus cooperation, then they are all wrong. Quite as opposite, this will unite us because our goal is stability of the global energy markets. We see Saudi Arabia as a friendly state for us. I have established very good relations with the king and the crown prince.
Well, let's shift focus now. There is no denying that French people love their cuisine. Now, more and more young people in France are opening up their own restaurants. A leading university is starting a tailor-made course to help students achieve their culinary dreams. And our Paris correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Miokik, reports.
It's the new age of restaurants in France, cooked up and managed by a youthful generation. Two restaurant associations in the country say the trend has accelerated in recent years. Paul Auger is one of the many under 35-year-olds starting out in the food industry.
It's to have more fun, have more contact with people and see new things every day. And working for oneself is very important.
There's been a 15% increase in the number of people starting their own business in the past 2 years. 1/5 are under the age of 30. Paul works with his friends Josh and Jeremy. He believes people in his age group are increasingly turning their backs on office jobs.
The 3 business partners behind this restaurant aren't the only young people who want to start a new eatery. In fact, demand is so high that the prestigious HEC Business School in Paris has launched a new master's degree in French cooking and management.
Students will be taught what they need to do to run a successful outlet, as well as how to prepare dishes.
We have more and more students willing to eventually be chef, open restaurants, and generally professional training as chef is very far from a business school. And we thought it would be great to make sure that they have access to both of it.
2 former HEC students set up Big Mama Group, which has 10 restaurants in France and England. They currently hire 1,000 people and have plans to expand further. But running a competitive restaurant isn't easy.
I can hear lots of young people saying, yeah, I want to try to launch a restaurant. So they are doing very small stuff. But at the end, they fail because they are saying, well, yeah, but I didn't want to do that, but I tried something that I didn't want to do. If you want to try something, do it. As big as it is, just be ambitious and do it.
Advice he hopes will encourage more young people to embrace the heat and stay in the kitchen. Oliver Whitfield-Mircic, CGTN, Paris.
Now, it is still relatively rare in China to see helicopters flying above the city skylines, but the market has been growing at nearly 20% annually during the past few years. The potential need for helicopters has attracted manufacturers at home and abroad to introduce new models into China. Take a look.
It's a sign of growing importance of the Chinese market that overseas companies are now making customized helicopters for Chinese users. Bell Helicopters from the United States has brought out its latest model developed for the state grid in China.
To give you an example, this one has an electrical hoist, right, to do human external cargo missions that allow maintainers from the China national grid to do quick repairs, right, on areas that are difficult to access to ensure continuity of power supply throughout China.
The cooperation between China and world major helicopter manufacturers goes even deeper, including developing new models together. The H175 7-ton class medium utility helicopter by China's Avic and Airbus.
We have been cooperating with Avic for more than 40 years, and we have especially a common product together, which is the H175 on our side, the AC352, which is a 50-50 helicopter, and we are able to sell this helicopter worldwide.
In recent years, China has been speeding up efforts to develop more types of helicopters to address its needs in sectors such as emergency medical services, firefighting, and disaster relief. In China, 70% of the land is mountainous, and plateau areas above 3,000 meters in altitude cover an area of nearly 3 million square kilometers. That means helicopters deployed in such terrain need to meet exacting standards of poses major challenges of high-altitude performance. The Aviation Industry Corporation of China is currently working on a new model, the Advanced Heavy Lift Helicopter.
There has been no ideal helicopters in the world to meet the requirement of transporting heavy engineering equipment in these plateau areas. The advanced heavy lift helicopters that we are working on is vital to the economic development, emergency rescue, and disaster relief mission in highland.
China is also closely working with Russia in developing its new model. Featured in high altitude and high temperature capability, the helicopter will increase the ability of China to respond to urgent, difficult, and unpredictable situations. Ning Hong, CGTN, Tianjin.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa announces plans to engage private investors to rescue South Africa's troubled state companies. We'll bring you more on that top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Stay with us. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria bead making modernizing the ancient African art.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Bead making is an ancient African craft. Beads themselves used to be a preserve of royals and a symbol of wealth and affluence. But in a fast modernizing world, bead makers are using their craft to not just make a living, but to also preserve the Nigerian culture. Here's Deji Badmus with a story of one Nigerian lady who is doing just that.
When it comes to beaded accessories and attires, residents of Abuja know where to go. From coral to glass, pearl, seed, sand, camel bone or vinyl, Susan Olaseni can work magic with them. With painstaking precision, she passes wires into the tiny holes of beads to create beautiful works of art. Susan has a master's degree in business administration and a graduate degree in tourism. But 17 years ago, she decided to make beads for a living when her white-collar job couldn't pay the bills anymore. She started her bead-making enterprise, Prezi Bridal Home.
When I came to Abuja 2007, I came as a graduate. I wanted to come and look for a job. The job I got wasn't really fetching me much money like that. At the end of the day, I have to quit my job to face my bead business, which eventually it was fetching me much more than I could ever think of.
Susan says she has no regrets since she crossed over to full-time entrepreneurship. She says the bead trade is very lucrative because it's cheap to make and in very high demand.
I started with just a bead of 3,000–4,000 naira. After making the bead, a friend of mine saw it and was like, wow, I like this. I would like to buy it for my wife, who is in South Africa. And at the end of the day, I was able to sell it for about 17,000–18,000 naira.
Being a traditional Nigerian art, bead making came easily to Susan. She learned the craft from her mother, who was a professional bead maker. But beyond making a living from it, Susan is using her craft to promote the Nigerian culture and identity.
We come to realize that gold accessories have come to take over our culture, which is not supposed to be. The beauty of our culture, the beauty of Nigeria, is to make sure our traditional still stand.
Susan became a bead maker to survive, but 17 years down the line, she's used her skill to empower over 200 women, teaching them financial freedom through bead making. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge, Timothy Cheruiyot and Uganda's Joshua Cheptegei named alongside 11 nominees for the IAAF Male Athlete of the Year award.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge is one of the 3 Africans who has been named among the nominees of the IAAF Male Athlete of the Year award. The 34-year-old is the current holder of the award after he broke the world record for the marathon last year in Berlin. This year, the world and Olympic champion became the first man to run a marathon in under 2 hours. He completed the Vienna course in a time of 1 hour, 59 minutes and 40 seconds on Saturday. He has also won the London Marathon, setting a new course record. Kipchoge is on the list alongside countryman Timothy Cheruiyot, who won the men's 15